Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. In the House this afternoon, I will introduce an important piece of legislation that addresses the evolving needs of Alberta, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024. If passed, this bill will provide crucial amendments to several key pieces of legislation, including the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, the Public's Right to Know Act, the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act, and the Alberta Evidence Act. Together, these amendments will help increase access to justice, enhance the availability of crime data for informed decision-making, and promote transparency within our system. I'll start with discussing the amendments to the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act. Alberta's population is on the rise, and with that comes the necessity to ensure that Albertans have fair representation in the Legislative Assembly. Under the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act, the general rule is that the population of a proposed electoral division should not be more than 25% above or below the average population of all proposed divisions. With Alberta's significant population growth, the population of 9 electoral divisions currently exceeds the upper threshold. To assist with addressing this, the amendments would direct the Electoral Boundaries Commission to create 2 additional electoral divisions, increasing our seat count to 89. Alberta's electoral map also needs to be redrawn to reflect the current demographic realities of our province. To be clear, government does not draw electoral boundaries. It is done through a regular and legislative process every 8 to 10 years. An independent Electoral Boundaries Commission will be established to review existing electoral boundaries and make proposals to this Assembly about area, boundaries, and names of electoral divisions. The next commission could be appointed as early as this fall, or as late as October 31st, 2026, to ensure new boundaries are in place before the next provincial election. Effective representation involves more than just ensuring a fair distribution of population. The Commission can consider a number of factors when making the recommendations, and the addition of 2 electoral divisions will give them added flexibility. Amendments in this bill would also update the criteria that commissions use to ensure they can consider the availability and means of communication in addition to improved transportation across our province. The Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024 will also amend the Public's Right to Know Act. This act legislates public reporting of crime data to make it easier for Albertans to know how crime impacts their community. In addition, the amendments would empower the Minister of Justice to request timely crime data from government departments, municipalities, and provincial police forces. Access to accurate and up-to-date crime information is essential for effective decision-making, ensuring appropriate resource allocation for policing, corrections, and community safety initiatives. The Critical Infrastructure Defence Act protects essential infrastructure from damage or interference caused by blockades, protests, or similar activities. Amendments in the Justice Statute Amendment Act 2024 would incorporate certain prescribed healthcare facilities to the definition of essential infrastructure in the Act, ensuring that the definition is contained in one place. Currently, these facilities are included in regulation. Amendments would also incorporate the facilities identified in the regulation in the Act itself, and once incorporated, the regulation will be repealed. Finally, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024 would amend the Alberta Evidence Act, which sets out the process for the taking of evidence in court, either orally or in writing. Amendments would give Albertans a simpler and more modern process for confirming the truth of the information they provide to the courts. By allowing Albertans to electronically certify their documents, we can streamline court operations, saving time and reducing the burden on our court staff. This change is part of an ongoing commitment to reduce red tape within the justice system, making it easier for Albertans to access the services that they need. I'll note that Albertans will still be able to swear or affirm an affidavit in person if they prefer. We are not removing this option. Additionally, the amendments would make it easier for Albertans to choose between swearing a religious oath or making a secular affirmation, improving their experience within the justice system. In conclusion, the Justice Statutes Amendment Act 2024 represents a significant step forward in ensuring our legal framework meets the current needs of our communities. These amendments would enhance access to justice, improve the efficiency of our systems, and ensure that legislation reflects the realities of a modern Alberta. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now take questions starting in the room before going to the phone lines. Please state your name and media for the record, and you're invited to please ask one question and one follow-up. Janet?
So you're changing, talking about electoral boundaries. Janet French from the CBC. You're talking about changing the definition of a community, including removing the requirement to have ridings within city boundaries. So does this enable the commission to then create these sort of pie slice type ridings that would lump an urban neighborhood in with surrounding rural areas? And if so, is that not advantageous to your party?
Well, look, I think that amending the wording of the Electoral Boundaries Commission Act to reflect what is happening in multiple jurisdictions across our country, and also adopting some of the language that has been passed by the courts in their direction to those that have been that have dealt with the particular electoral boundaries acts in their respective provinces is an appropriate exercise of what we're trying to do here. We also know that a number of rural or semi-rural communities are very much closely connected to their urban cities they're nearby, and I think it's important that effective representation include the ability for this commission to be able to deal with the flexibility they need to create appropriate constituency redraws that are appropriately representative of this population.
And how did you come up with the number 2 seats? Is that the number of rural seats you think you would lose if the commission did have to juggle it around to accommodate for city growth?
Well, no, let me tell you, that wasn't much of a factor at all. What was a factor, in fact, was that Alberta has grown by approximately 155,000 people since the last provincial election, and a growth rate of approximately 3.2%. We anticipate that Alberta's population will continue to grow, but more importantly, the number 2, moving us from 87 to 89, closely aligns us with the recent move that British Columbia made in moving up to 93. They've got a population that is slightly larger than ours. However, the proportionate number of representatives to their population is very similar to the proportionate number of representatives at the 89 level that we will have in relation to our population. So we used other provinces to help align. The other thing that is important to note is this. I think that the number that the Electoral Boundaries Commission has established in recent years is important because it provides for a ratio that we've used for a very long time that connects the number of constituents to a particular MLA. In keeping with this this theme, we've moved to the number 89, which will maintain a manageable number of particular constituents if we look at population alone to the number of MLAs elected in this assembly. That is a signal that we want fair but effective representation here for all Albertans.
Michelle.
I was wondering though, Minister White, or Michelle Bellefontaine, CBC, I was wondering, Minister, though, I think the Stelmach government added 4, was it in 2009? And I mean, given over the last decade how much the province has grown in population, I'm wondering if you had contemplated perhaps doing more than 2 additional ridings.
We did contemplate more than 2. We contemplated keeping the number the same, and we contemplated the move from 87 to 89. But what became relatively apparent soon enough is that if we were going to maintain the ratio of elected representatives to the population number that we think is appropriate, that has long sort of guided the theme of the Electoral Boundaries Commission for a long time, and in comparison with our neighbors, and I think that's important, we landed on the number 89. 89, based on the population we currently have, gives us about the same number of constituents per MLA that, for example, BC would have at their number of 93.
And just as a follow-up, have you estimated the costs of adding 2 more MLAs?
Well, we know relatively roughly the number based on the numbers that are provided by the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. That'll vary from place to place. MLAs that are more the further situated from Edmonton, for example, may incur more travel expenses than those living in Edmonton. The number is relatively similar all across the board in terms of what we anticipate. But I think the more important question here is whether or not it would be appropriate to add these 2 seats and thereby improve the level of representation. In my opinion and in my view, that pales, the cost of 2 additional MLAs pales in comparison to the number of MLAs that we'll receive, which will deliver better service for Albertans.
Jack Farrell with the Canadian Press. Also, so in 2010, the Electoral Boundaries Commission, in their final report, they wrote that they received like really substantial opposition to adding those 4 new seats that Michelle alluded to, and they wrote like that opposition, quote, seems to indicate that further increases in the number of electoral divisions will need to be carefully assessed. And I guess my question with that is like, what else was considered besides population?
Well, population is always a primary factor. I'll begin with that, but certainly the fact that our province is growing faster than any other province in the country is an important consideration. One of the things that we also considered was the relative geographic size, for example, of some of the rural MLAs and the challenges that all of our rural MLAs are facing in terms of distance, travel distances. Safety was a consideration as well for me personally. We have MLAs all across this province that are traveling, some of them 4 hours to get from end to end, and in the wintertime, especially in northern Alberta, for example, that could be treacherous. We'd like to give the Commission as much flexibility as possible. And I think we've got a well-grounded reason for moving from 87 to 89 based on the population growth alone. But there are also a number of other changes in the Act that will provide for flexibility when the Commission contemplates the boundaries and be able to make the best decision possible for Albertans.
Okay, I'll take one more from the room before moving
Can I
on.
follow up or no?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Please, Jeff.
So you said like the commission could be appointed this fall. As an aside, like, do you mean like literally like this fall or like 2025 this fall? And then my actual question is like, do you have a better indication of that? Like, are you guys like considering who you're going to appoint right now? Is that where it started yet or no? Or
Well, to answer the first part of your question, yes, as early as this fall of 2024, and that is and up to the I believe it's up to 2026. I think I don't have the date right here in front of me, but in any event, yes, we have that sort of span of period of time to appoint the commission. We've not made any decisions whatsoever on what that might consist of or who might be, who that might comprise. I do know that the Act stipulates a very specific set of skills that the chair will need to possess, and that will that provides us with some guidance as to who that chair may be. But we don't have any decisions made whatsoever to that. The primary objective here really is to make sure that we introduce the particular amendments this legislative session with the idea that if it's passed, we'll begin to look at some of the things you've asked about.
Okay, Graham.
Greg
Then,
Thompson, the Toronto Star.
Yes, sir.
I asked the Premier about this back in the spring, and she said she wanted to get on it this year. Because you can't wait until 2026, right? You need to get constituencies to change the boundaries, fundraising, getting people organized and getting candidates. Like, there's no way you can wait 2 years. And the impression I got from her is she wanted this started this fall. So you've announced this, so I get the impression the commission will be named this fall.
Well, look, I can say this. I found the date that I was looking for. October 31st, 2026 is the last time, the last date that the commission can be appointed. But given the work that has to be done and sort of the approach that they have to take in canvassing the entire province, receiving the recommendations and submissions, and then providing a report for debate in the legislature, I think it's safe to say that it is likely that we will move sooner rather than later on this.
And as for the 2 more seats, the population growth, you're right, but most of it's centered on the big cities, Edmonton and Calgary. So you must be, I guess, assuming there's going to be Calgary getting more seats, or maybe one for Edmonton, one for both, or two in Calgary, because the population growth is in those cities. Are you thinking the rest of Alberta may get 2 more seats?
Well, look, I can say with absolute certainty that it would not be up to me, nor would it be up to government to make those recommendations as to where they land. I think that's up for to the commission itself to present those findings after canvassing the province and hearing the submissions from Albertans, from all corners of this province. Once that is made to us as a legislative assembly, we'll certainly debate the recommendations and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine Gurkowski, Alberta Today. On the Public's Right to Know Act, could you kind of explain what more data you were looking for and why that police data wasn't enough when getting that picture of crime?
Yeah, most certainly. The Public's Right to Know Act, as you recall, was a mandate item in the last legislative term, and it was passed with the intention and the idea that it would make the information available to the public easier to access. The intention was to make sure that those who were looking for statistics about their particular communities would be able to access it in the form of the Public's Right to Know Act. The question or the motivation for this isn't about whether or not we're receiving data from the agencies and stakeholders, but rather the consistency and predictability of it as well. I'll say this to you. The most important data are ones that flow with at regular intervals and in a consistent manner. And right now, there is nothing in the legislation that would, for example, set those sort of that flow of information at regular intervals from our policing agencies, from our municipalities, and whatnot. It is of no help to receive data from our policing agencies, for example, 1 year and not be able to report the next, because the most important thing to take away from this are trends. That's important for all people, and I think Albertans especially, where things are moving, what communities one might be looking at, for example, and what is happening in those communities is something that the Albertans, I think, deserve to know, and deserve to know with relative consistency. So to answer your question, it is not just about setting a legislation that will enable the government to request this data, but also to make sure that the statistics come in a consistent manner that is, valuable not only to government, but to Albertans, to the media, and to policing agencies and municipalities as well.
And there's
follow-up?
always this difficulty, back to the Election Commission. There's still that 25% room above or below. Did you look at the ratios of some ridings? Because some ridings have very low population and are spread over huge geographic area. And I don't know if that's how does that line up with your goal of equity?
Well, let me tell it to you in a different way. We've got 2 additional seats coming forward, and we have a number of amendments being made to the criteria that the Electoral Boundaries Commission can review. With that, a finite piece of land in the borders of Alberta. With 2 additional seats, inevitably, one would expect that the constituencies might be reduced in size. One of the guiding principles I hope the Commission takes into consideration as well is the geographic size along with population. I can't stress enough to you the rigors of this particular job and some of the challenges of traveling in northern Alberta or elsewhere for that matter. We're all from Alberta, and we know that sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate with us. Giving the opportunity for the Commission to contemplate not just population growth, but all of the factors that we talked about earlier, along with I think a primary consideration of geography is just as important as all of the other criteria that we're putting forward here in this amendment.
Okay, we'll now move over to the phone lines. Operator, please put through the first caller.
The first question is from Edith Vogler from CBC. Your line is now open.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I was wondering, can you define the communities of interest and why it was important for your government to erase the part with the boundaries of cities for Edmonton and Calgary?
Well, thank you for the question and thank you for the call. The emphasis doesn't necessarily erase the municipal boundaries for Calgary and Edmonton. It simply says that the commission may consider, along with the municipalities, regional and rural communities that are, for example, situated near major urban centers. One of the best examples of this, for example, might be the close proximity of Chestermere or St. Albert to Edmonton, for example. Others could be the First Nations reserves, Métis settlements, and other communities that are very closely connected to major urban centers, and yet don't have a representative that is situated in or near an urban city. The idea here is to give the flexibility for the commission to identify, for example, communities of interest, communities that share, common transportation routes or common themes, or simply a strong network of telecommunications or roadways, and see if there is a way that Albertans can be better represented by redrawing the particular boundaries of a constituency that envelops sort of those communities of interest for better and fairer representation.
Do you have a follow-up, Edith?
Yes, I do. You just stated that it wouldn't erase the thing about the existing community boundaries within the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, but on the document we received, what the commission will have to take into consideration this point, like wherever possible, the existing community boundaries within the cities of Edmonton and Calgary are erased. Wherever possible, the existing municipal boundaries are erased, and the number of municipalities and other local authorities are also erased. So I'm not quite sure.
So I think what I intended to articulate to you, perhaps, and maybe that was something that I didn't clearly articulate, is that the existing act prior to the amendments requires a commission to consider the municipal boundaries when deciding its constituencies, its provincial constituencies. The new amendment would do away with that mandatory requirement and make a number of new factors permissive. One of those being that if the commission deems it appropriate to connect communities of interest, despite the fact that they don't share the same municipal boundary, for example, then that would be okay because those communities of interest are interconnected in other ways. And so that is not to presuppose what the commission might do, but there are certainly multiple areas all across this province that are very closely situated and connected to their major municipal urban centers.
Operator, put through the next caller, please.
The next question is from Emmanuel Sens from Radio Canada. Your line is now open.
Hi, Minister. Just to clarify, so under the new act about election writing, it could be possible for ridings to, let's say, include Chestermere with parts of East Calgary, or for Beaumont to be included with the urban ridings of South Edmonton. Why? How do you explain that makes sense? Because they have very different realities. They're kind of semi-rural areas with very urban, suburban areas.
Well, I think we might, I think you're correct in the assessment that this would enable boundary commissions to consider those types of communities in their redraw. I would disagree with you on one point, and that is that given where we are in 2024 and the sort of the interconnection between smaller cities, towns, and counties to major urban centers, I don't think that there's a ton of distinctiveness in terms of where Albertans would like to see their representation. What I will say is that in your example of Chestermere, for example, I'd venture to say that many people from Chestermere travel to Calgary on a regular basis and vice versa. And because of that, I think it's appropriate for the Commission to consider as a factor that they may consider Remember, it's not mandatory, but it is a permissive amendment to allow them to consider whether it would be appropriate to connect those two communities into a constituency that has one representative. It is, this is really about flexibility. It is about allowing our commission the best flexibility and the ability to consider a multitude of different things that have been adopted by other provinces, that have been recommended by our courts, and I think that are well-grounded in what we're bringing forward.
Do you have a follow-up, Emmanuel?
So I understand what you're saying. So this is a bad faith question, but it's not about drowning the urban progressive voters with rural voters, in your opinion?
Well, it's not just my opinion. I think that many jurisdictions are adopting this approach because it gives better representation, more effective representation. In fact, some of the wording in the amendments were taken directly out of the case law and the jurisprudence on electoral boundaries. This is something that we're trying to do to reflect what Alberta is moving towards, and that is the most innovative province in Canada, the best place to live, and certainly connected in multiple ways, not just by roadways, but via virtual means and otherwise. So no, I would say to you that other provinces, other jurisdictions have adopted this language. We've received the direction from our courts, both here and elsewhere, and the language that we're adopting is very consistent with language that is being recommended in both the jurisprudence and that has been adopted by various provinces all across Canada.
All right, thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have. Have a good day.
Thanks all.